pleased to be joined by Robert Janicki. His book is so important, and I think of him being in Vietnam at 20 years old. Wow. And what he experienced and the camaraderie with the people that he was with, and being, that infantry squad leader from 67 to 68. And the book is called Looking Back, a Marine's personal experiences as an infantry squad leader with the 3rd Marines in Vietnam. And like I said, 67, 68. So, Robert, thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much, Kate. It's great being with you.
So, for you, you're 20 years old. Tell us about the experience of going to Vietnam. Take us to camp first and then going to Vietnam.
Yeah, way before Vietnam, we all met in California in Camp Pendleton, and we're there for 2 or 3 months. And that was more conditioning, climbing hills, putting on heavy packs on your back, and we went through simulated Vietnam villages, patrol tactics, and everything that would hopefully give us an edge when we finally got there. And then we were flown over to Okinawa, where we went through 2 weeks of jungle warfare training up in the mountains of Okinawa. And that got us closer to the weather conditions, the humidity, the bugs, and um, much better images of how we needed to cross rivers, the terrain, how we needed to stagger ourselves in patrols, how to camouflage ourselves, all the above.
So leading into that, you have all that prep, but you still don't know what it's going to be like to actually be in the thick of it. Do you remember the first firefight?
Yeah, yeah, like it was yesterday. It's you can't and this goes to any war or any severe element of conflict. You can't prepare yourself for it. If you haven't been there, you only have to be there once to be ready for it. But when it's your very first time, it's truly a rude awakening. The intensity of the fights, um, all the practice you do and you're shooting out, nobody's shooting at you. Um, the bombardments, the rockets, the mortars. In our very first firefight, we were um, up on a hill. Actually, it was called Operation Granite. It was at the very edge of the Ashaw Valley, and I was only there a week or so. And our front elements got hit. We took some casualties. Um, they called all the new guys up to take the casualties down to a an area that they're trying to clear for a landing zone. And as we're working our way up there, it was very intense fighting. And now we had to get up there, and we had to. And this is probably one of the rudest awakenings that I had throughout the entire war. Is we had this Marine that had been killed. They had him laying down in his poncho, and two of us picked him up and tried to bring him down the mountainside. Now this is triple canopy jungle, and underneath the jungle, they're called rainforest for a reason because they're so humid that the moisture drops off the leaves, and you're sliding in mud. So here we're trying to be respectful to this fallen Marine, and we're cursing at ourselves all the way down the side of the mountain because we weren't treating him very well. And then we had to bring him down to the LZ and try to help him get out, but he was already gone.
Wow. I mean, and that was it. You were right in the thick of it. You had all those patrols, you had all those firefights, and you talk about the 1,000 mile stare. And I'm sure that
Mm-hmm.
there's people that are listening to this that have no idea what that is. Tell us what that is.
It's actually it's an incorrect statement that I made. It's 1,000 yards there, and it's just something that happens to you. And again, this goes to everybody that's been into a battle situation. Um, Over time, all the innocent images that your eyes used to portray are gone. They're just your eyes are just empty souls looking out. Um, and it's extremely consistent among all combat veterans.
And you talk about too the closeness of your group and of course losing guys And you talk about specifically about four of you, and
Hmm.
that it didn't matter that you were the white guy. It didn't matter at all. You had each other's backs. You were in this to get through this, right?
Yeah, like I said in the beginning of the book, I was the minority. Um, we had Indians, we had Mexicans, blacks, we had Tahitians, we had Canadians. It was purely a mixing bowl. Um, but you said it, very clearly there. When you get in a situation like that, you can't let your brother down. I mean, you're in foxholes every night. You're on patrols every day, and you learned very quickly that um, we really needed each other. I mean, this is almost by the end of week one, you were very attuned to your responsibility in a situation.
Wow. Just thinking about that. And the book Looking Back, which is you're incredibly vulnerable and real in it. It's an excellent, excellent read. What made you decide to write it, to pull it all together, to take yourself back there?
That's a very good question. I worked for the phone company in Connecticut, which eventually became AT&T in the 1990s. Um, but I was already in counseling. I didn't want to admit it, but my wife at the time and my sister were adamant that I needed to go talk to somebody that I could relate to. And very fortunate at the very same time, the VA had started their Vietnam Veterans Outreach Centers. And I started there in 1979, and I stayed with my group to 1985. And what I learned from that is to best serve ourselves, we needed to find each other and start a conversation. All of your recovery is finding somebody that you can relate to, um, and so you can share your feelings without feeling like you're going to be criticized or ostracized for what you just said. So reaching out to other veterans um, allowed you to really vent. Very honestly, that's a good word for it. Vent your emotions without contradiction. And so I started a newsletter in 1983, and it quickly grew to thousands throughout the state of Connecticut. Then we became SBC veterans, and then we became AT&T veterans, which was hundreds of thousands of veterans. And the common goal was to share names and addresses of who the veterans were, what building they worked with, and they just started searching each other out just to chat. But by doing that, I said there needs to be a story, my story, that I can share. That when a veteran, well, initially the focus was so veterans could relate to what I'm saying and feel comfortable with their own feelings. That was the goal. But then that evolved into an educational tool for my family members, my kids, neighbors, everybody that grew up with me that never knew anything about me from the war. So it started off as a veterans educational tool, then also adult educational tool.
Wow, and that had to give you some peace of mind, I would think, because now you almost like a duty because people are relying on that because you're really pulling people together. That had to feel good.
Well, it's not only wonderful for me, but within the company, they really embraced the Vietnam veterans, starting with the Vietnam veterans, but then all veterans. And we held not Memorial Day parades. We held Memorial Day and Veterans Day flag raisings. We flew to POWs on every office building, and that's throughout AT&T now. And so through that, um, our company learned that we had a tremendous amount of Vietnam veterans, and if they had issues, then their wives and their children were being impacted by it. And a lot of the wives also worked for the company. So they had our company counselors. We had the VA counselors come in and teach them the quirks on how to interface with somebody that had survived through a combat situation, which is nothing like anything of a corporate world.
All right.
From there, they directed them to better services.
Yeah. For you, and this is a great book. Looking back, like I said, I haven't found anything quite like it of everything that I've read about Vietnam. I think you really lay it out there. And you
Yeah,
can get this book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever great books are sold, Robert's book, of course. But for you, when you left Vietnam, when you finally left and it was over, your tour was over, what was that like for you, you leaving?
the hardest part of my life. And you ask any Vietnam veteran, we had a brotherhood that protected us in Vietnam. We came home to a society that just wanted to hurt us. It was absolutely horrible. Um, and my early years, I got home back to Connecticut in 1969, and like all the rest of us, we couldn't talk about our service. Every evening news, if there was a robbery, it was a crazed Vietnam veteran. If it was a car accident, it was a Vietnam veteran high on drugs that caused the accident. The next day they retracted it, but they did, the damage was done. So we all just went about our business. We got jobs, we started having families, and nobody knew who we were. And that lasted a very long time. And then eventually, well, not until the last 20 years that people started to appreciate veterans, where some of us older folks felt like we could raise our head and talk about it without being beaten up.
Wow.
So it was very hard to come home to.
And you and I talked about this off the air. I asked you about the Vietnam Wall, which initially was
Yeah.
like, oh, Vietnam Wall. But then now it's, as you're saying, it was something where people could go, people who served, they could find names, they could weep, they could let it out. And it really served an incredible purpose in the end and is a beautiful tribute to Vietnam veterans.
It most certainly is. When I shared this with you earlier, when it was being designed, a lot of us had a lot of issues with the design concept. Who was designing it? She was Asian. That didn't sit well with us. It was black. That didn't, that shame that didn't sit well with us. And above all, it was in the ground. That really didn't sit well with us. But I was there for the dedication of it, and I wept. I wept for hours when I found the names of my men. And the walls, for those that don't know, it's in chronological order from the day it started to the day it ended. So if you found one of your men on the wall, you could go up, which is before that day, or down after that day, and you could track down other men's of your unit. So I could reach out, I can touch, and it's truly like actually touching your friend when you reach out and put your fingers on their name. It was a tremendous healing process for me. I've been back many times.
Yeah, it is tremendous to see it, absolutely. So when people read your book, they're listening to us and they want to know more, and you have incredible stories in there. We're not giving away everything. When they get it and they read it, what do you hope they take away from it?
Well, it's minimally what it was like to be in combat during our war. But I think in general, to try to get an appreciation for what anybody did in uniform, um, that answers the call for our country, um, and walk away with hopefully uh, a direction that never allow what happened in Vietnam ever happen again. Again, it's an educational tool, um, to learn the severity of what it's like to be in real, extremely difficult situations. I try to share the mindset that you go through while you're in a very bad situation, how you deal with tremendous loss, um, and it's just an educational story about sacrifice and living through hard times. To give respect to everybody that wears a uniform for the United States and goes off to a bad situation.
Mm. So well said. A perfect place to end this. Robert Janicki, thank you so much.
Okay, Kate, it was great talking to you. Have a good day.
You too.